It's May Bush from Career Mastery, and I am with David Burkus, who is a friend of mine, and he is the author of award-winning books such as Under New Management. And today I have invited David to come and share with us some of the wonderful ideas and insights from his newest book, which is called Pick a Fight. And we're going to get to that in just a moment. But I just want to brag about David a little bit because he is highly accomplished. And I know, and David is also very humble. So he's probably cringing right now. I'm looking at you, David, and but I'm going to do this anyway because you are awesome. So David is, among other things, ranked as one of the world's top business thought leaders by Thinkers 50. And that has been the case since 2017. That's a big accomplishment. He has been featured in publications like the Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review, Fast Company, and interviewed on all kinds of networks, CNN, etc. And he has a TED Talk that has been viewed over 2 million times. I encourage you to look him up. But today we are here to talk about his latest book, which I think I listened to it. It's called Pick a Fight, and it has some real gems that we can take and use, especially in this environment where our team members, we ourselves, when you look at the stats, people are mostly not very motivated or energized in their work. And David, you have done some wonderful research and writing about how to turn that around. So welcome. And let's start by just talking about what does it mean? What do you mean by Pick a Fight? It's such an unusual title.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I mean, it is a deliberately provocative title. And you hit the nail on the head actually when teeing it up, which is that we've known to track things like motivation and employee engagement for 2 or 3 decades now. I mean, employee engagement alone, right? The Gallup Q12, the standard for measuring employee engagement, one of their questions is whether or not people feel like the mission and purpose of the organization matters for what they do, whether or not what they do on a day-to-day basis aligns with that, right? And yet the numbers haven't changed, right? For all of the lip service that we pay to mission, vision, purpose, all of that engagement, the Gallup numbers have basically been flat for 20 years. And I think one of the big reasons for that is that things like mission, purpose, et cetera, are so vague.
Yeah.
When we give them to executives and say, you need to be a purpose-led organization, you need to have a compelling mission statement, et cetera, they're so vague that people don't make that individual connection. And so I scoured the research, and one of the things I found that I felt like had been overlooked is the way that outside adversity, outside threats, or actively working against something can bond and motivate people together. And so what I found is basically my litmus test for whether or not an organization has a compelling mission or purpose is, can your people answer the question, what are we fighting for? Not who are we fighting, right? Who are we fighting is a question about competitors. There's a lot of research that suggests that people don't care about questions like that. They care about that larger thing that you are fighting for, that vision you want in the world, but also the stakes of what happens if we don't achieve that vision. And that's why I arrived at fight. The full phrase pick a fight, by the way, is a bit of a double meaning. So yeah, there's that idea that you need to pick a fight against some evil or injustice in the world that you want to remove, but you also need to choose your fight wisely, because there's only a few templates or archetypes of fights that really do motivate people, and fights against competitors are provably not one of them.
Oh, that's interesting, because I'm just thinking back to the days when I was working in a big organization, and there was this kind of thing where I guess it's a little like Star Wars, where there's a Darth Vader organization and we're the Luke Skywalker, but that maybe works in the movies, but not so much in a company.
Well, I mean, come on, even in Star Wars, there's a big debate over whether or not the rebels were actually the good guys, right? I mean, there was peace and prosperity in the Empire. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. But in reality, I mean, think about it. As soon as you jump ship to another organization, the whole narrative flips, right? And now you're the resistance. And in a world where people change careers 5 to 7 times, right? Not just companies, but whole careers, that narrative kind of falls apart. It may have worked when you chose one company and you worked with them for 40 years, but it doesn't work now because of that larger sort of transient nature of employment right now. People see the bigger picture and they don't see, oh yeah, I should be actively hostile to this other company I might go to work for. So there's that element. There's also some interesting research that suggests that people on the receiving end of trash talk, right? People on the receiving end of fight rhetoric end up more motivated than the people you're trying to motivate. So when a CEO or a leader actually starts bad-mouthing a competitor, the only people who get motivated by that are when the competitor hears the words of that CEO. Now they're motivated to work against you, right? So that becomes a big problem as well. So it just, in a sense, whether it's the modern age of careers or this larger idea that you're actually motivating your competitors by bad-mouthing them, it just doesn't work. Personally, I think it never did, but it definitely doesn't work now.
Okay, so in a moment, I'd like to ask you what does work and what kind of fights do we want to pick. But just one of the things that you're making me realize is that this idea of making these conscious choices is so important. So so what are these fights that we want to be picking? And if it's not the one that you were talking about, which sounds like negative energy, right? Bad energy to like be tete-a-tete with the competitors. I think you're about to share with us some ways to pick fights that are positive energy.
Yeah, that's exactly right, right? And I should also say that some of the reason for this competitor thing is like we started tracking market share in a lot of organizations, and that automatically puts things diametrically opposed. But like, one of the examples we talk about in the book is Apple versus Microsoft, and how Steve Jobs did a great job of phrasing Microsoft as the enemy. And then when Apple was going bankrupt, Microsoft bailed them out. Why? Because Microsoft was focused on the larger fight of how computing would democratize and add value to people's lives, how personal computing in particular was a great value they could bring to the world. Like, there's all sorts of reasons that Microsoft saw what they call the superordinate goal, right? And so you want to make sure you're in line with that. You want to make sure you're in that larger purpose. When I looked at all of the research, I basically found inside the realm of intrinsic motivation, right? So extrinsic and intrinsic. Inside the realm of intrinsic motivation, there start to be these different levers or classifications of ways you can design a job to be motivating. And so I started looking at those, and what I found is basically you could use that research as 3 different archetypes, or I sometimes like to think of them as Mad Libs, right? Fill in the blank and we've got your fight of fights that you can use to motivate people. So real quick, they are, I call them the revolutionary fight, the underdog fight, and the ally fight. And the revolutionary fight is the one I've been hinting at most so far since we've been talking. Anytime you as a company, as an organization, even as a nonprofit, can say the entire industry or society finds this acceptable and we refuse to accept that, you have a revolutionary fight. You have a thing that you want to change in the world because it's an injustice, because it's environmentally damaging. It doesn't actually matter. But what you need to do is point to a norm, a standard of being that everybody's been complacent about. And everybody says, oh, that's acceptable. And you say, no, we refuse to accept that anymore. We're different for that reason. You've begun that revolution. The underdog fight is, this personally is the one that resonates with me a lot. I was born in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is the city of underdogs, probably for the globe, right? We're known for,
right?
Yeah, exactly. We're known
Ultimate
for
underdog.
We're known for 2 things. We're known for cheesesteaks, maybe 3, throwing snowballs at Santa Claus, and for Rocky Balboa, right? And think about it. Rocky Balboa is a fictional character who loses a boxing match, right? And that is that's our like city sports hero. But if you remember in the very first Rocky, now there's like 11 of them. But if you remember in the very first Rocky, he says, I don't want to win. I don't care about winning. I care about going the distance. That's weird. Why? Because I want to prove that I'm not a bum. That's the core motivator of the underdog fight. It's not enough to just be the little guy. You have to show that you've been rejected or received criticism that is unfair because you have a plan for proving those people wrong. So it's not just the rejection, you also need the rebuttal, right? I think about companies that play to this all the time, and I think about groups like Netflix. Everybody knows the story of Netflix being rejected by Blockbuster. What not a lot of people know is that Blockbuster had a great reason to do it. Netflix was hemorrhaging money when they met with Blockbuster, and Blockbuster passed on buying them. What they got out of that meeting, though, was an underdog story. Now we have a rejection and a plan for how we're going to prove people wrong by scaling up this company, right? So that's the underdog fight. The underdog fight, all the way, also has a lot of compelling research on a personal level. This is career mastery, after all. On a personal level of taking that underdog narrative when you're hunting for a job or hunting for a job transition can be a strong motivator to keep going, because that feeling of I've got to prove that these people, that my past is not my future, all of that can actually be a really compelling narrative. That's the underdog fight. And the very last one is the ally fight. And the ally fight quite simply says it's not about our fight at all. It's about their fight and what they're fighting for and how we help them. And the good news on the ally fight is you get to define they however you want. It can be a customer, it can be a community that you serve, it can be stakeholders, right? It can even be internally. One of my favorite companies is the WD-40 company. They make WD-40. They're a one product company, and they sell a fundamentally not motivating product. They sell oil. I mean, it's just oil. It's a special formulation of oils, but it's oil. But what they've been focused on for a number of years has been what they call the tribe, their community, growing a company on the back of this one product where everybody has the chance to play to their strengths. Everybody has the chance to craft a job that's intrinsically meaning to them, right? If you ask anybody at WD-40, what are you fighting for? They'll tell you they're fighting for the tribe. So the ally fight is that. It's not about our fight, it's about their fight. And by doing business, we help them win their fight. And you get to define they however you want.
So it sounds like you could apply this to your client base, or your customer base. That's what WD-40 is doing.
Yeah. So there's a lot of research too that shows things like in the revolutionary fight or the underdog fight. That's often in marketing speak is called a challenger brand, right? You're the young up and coming brand that's seeking to replace the old stodgy industry thing. And you see things like lower cost of customer acquisition, meaning that consumers get behind your idea and need to be marketed to less in order to come alongside. So yeah, this can be a branding and positioning thing as well. Most of it is drawn from the research on what motivates individuals and teams and what gets them bonded. And so I always emphasize that it starts inside the company, because if your people don't believe it, no one outside the company is going to believe it.
Wow, really interesting. And in a moment, I'd like to understand how we can apply this to the teams that we lead, and then how we can apply this if we're a team member and not the leader of the team.
Yeah, absolutely.
But before we do that, I just want to clarify one thing that I just want to play with these three to make sure that they're crystal clear: revolutionary fight, underdog fight, and the ally fight. So can a company or a team be fighting more than one? We want to pick only one, right?
So I think from a messaging standpoint, it's important to pick only one. It's possible, especially when you have a large organization, it's possible that different people are different fights resonate with them, right? So as a team leader, for example, it pays to know what your people are motivated by, and then you can help shape that narrative. I mean, this is a broader misconception I think happens in leadership a lot. We talk a lot about crafting a vision and then casting it out to the people and getting buy-in, but It doesn't actually work like that, right? Okay. The leaders who cast the most compelling vision are the ones who already understood the vision that's written on the hearts and minds of their people, right? Here in the United States, we talk about Martin Luther King Jr. and the I Have a Dream speech. It's really improperly titled because it was the "This is our dream" speech. He just happened to find a way to put it to words. But every single person, 600,000 people who came out to hear him talk, heard their own dream put to words, right? That's what is a compelling vision. It's not that, here, this is my vision for the world and you should adopt it. That's the wrong mentality. You want to start with what you know will get people's buy-in first, because it's already written on their hearts and minds. So that's why I think you can have some overlap here, especially in a large organization, but it's incumbent on the leader to know which one will probably resonate with the most amount of people, and stick to that messaging first in the beginning, because what you want is people sharing the vision with each other. You don't want the leader to have to just keep saying it and saying it and saying it. You want people to be able to share it with each other so that it's seen as this collective vision, not just here's the boss's new vision for this month because he read this book on a flight, you know?
Right. Yes. And you're also reminding me of, if it's just the boss, it's kind of this bilateral thing, and the boss or the leader's always having to be at the center of communicating it. Instead of it just going, dare I say going viral, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, and really when I work with a lot of organizations to start implementing this stuff, really the thing that I say is that as a leader, as the senior leader, you only, depending on how charismatic he or she is, I either say you only have to, or I say you only get to talk about the fight once. After that, your job is chief curator. Your job is to find the stories of how, if it's the revolutionary fight, how the industry is still ripping people off and we're different, or how we're making progress and changing the industry, right? If it's the ally fight, nobody wants to hear you talk about how a customer's life is better. They want to hear the customer. So your job becomes the chief storyteller or the chief curator after that. And that's what helps it cross laterally anyway. It's not like what you were talking about with a leader on top just saying the vision over and over and over and over again. There's a lot of research that shows that doesn't have the same salience, that doesn't have the same resonance as when you as a leader just focus on collecting those stories and making sure they get shared throughout your people.
I love this. And when I'm looking down, David, I'm paying total attention. I'm writing notes. This is really big. Okay. Collecting stories and being that storyteller, because stories are really what resonate with the human brain over the centuries, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, there's a ton, like being an org psychologist by training, there's a bunch of overly complicated models about what defines company culture, for example. But if you want to cut through all of that clutter, I think about company culture as what stories do we tell, and then what artifacts tell the story when we're not there, right? What are the symbols or the tangible artifacts or the little rituals that reinforce those stories? Notice what I didn't say, which is grand CEO speech, right? That's not culture. The culture is the stories that we tell and the artifacts that we see and interact with on a day-to-day basis. And as a leadership team, that's your job, is to decide what are those stories going to be, what are those artifacts going to be, and then let people interact with them. It's not to just keep being the center of attention the whole time.
Yes, yes. That's such an important thing to remember. So if we're thinking about if it from a position of the team leader, are there ways to, are there questions we need to ask ourselves to be able to apply this well? How do we figure it for ourselves?
Yeah, so I think a lot of this depends on what I found, especially since the book came out, is that the bigger problem with a lot of organizations isn't that they lack mission and purpose. I mean, every company has a mission statement. It's that it doesn't resonate with people. There's some disconnect somewhere, right? And so even as a frontline manager, but basically at any level, the first job is to figure out where we're at, figure out whether or not the existing mission does resonate with people, whether or not people even know it, right? One of my friends describes this as the glass plaque problem. We get this elegantly crafted mission statement. We put it on a glass plaque in headquarters, right? And everybody walks right past it on their way to the elevator, right? Nobody ever remembers it. Yeah. So what I encourage a lot of managers to do and a lot of leaders to do is to ask two questions right off the bat to get a sense for where we are. The first question is actually a simple, open-ended, what do we do here? Right? What do we do here? And if people respond either with a diversity of different answers, that's a problem, right? Because that shows there's not a lot of uniformity in the answer. And if people respond with something like we sell widgets, right? Or we provide tax and auditing services, that's a problem, right? Because the larger picture is obviously not getting captured. But now now you have data, right? And then the second question is, how does what you do help us do that? Which is really a question about whether or not we've done that second piece I was talking about on the top with the Gallup engagement question. Mission and vision, right? But also does my day-to-day job play a part in that? If you ask them directly, how does what you do help us do that? And they have an answer, great. Most of the time they don't. And so as the individual manager, that gives you an idea of where your problem is. Maybe your problem is that you need to take the existing mission, vision, purpose, whatever, and craft it into one of these archetypes for the team for them so that they can be motivated. But
one of the three fight types.
One of the three fights, the revolutionary, the underdog, So maybe that's your job, or maybe your job is to just help remind them how your job helps the existing mission, right? So what the first step is depends on where your team is, but what do we do here and how does what you do help us do that will give you clarity on where you need to start.
Cool. So can we flip now to, is there anything else for the leaders to know before we flip to what of your
there's so much more, but if we talk about it, we're going to have time to talk about the individual side.
All right, so should we go to the individual then?
Yeah.
Okay, because that was really rich about the leader. So what if I'm just one of the team members, not just, but I don't feel like I can decide which fight it is, or can I? Right. Or do I pick my own fight? Or how do I think about that?
Both end, right? So candidly, I would ask you, if your leader's not doing this for you, right? You be the leader without the title, and you ask yourself those same two questions.
Okay.
But depending on your answer, it's going to be a little bit different, right? At this point, your job, your task is to engage in what we call job crafting. Once you've decided what fight as a company we're in, and maybe you just don't feel it, or once you decide what your own individual fight is. I mean, candidly, I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for about 10 years, and I always used the underdog fight because I always basically worked in a lower volume area than everybody else. And so the whole idea of the underdog against other people in the company, right? They don't appreciate the rich opportunity we have, and I'm going to prove them wrong, was what drove me, right? So once either you can take that whole company vision, you can craft one for yourself based on this, but really what you need to do for your own engagement, for your own sanity, dare I say, is to engage in what Amy Rosnesky calls job crafting, which involves looking at that fight and then looking at the day-to-day tasks that you do, the relationships that you have as part of the work, right? Do you actually get to see the end user of your company's product or service, or are you just in a call center or somewhere not doing it? Maybe you need to deliberately create some time in your week where you can engage with the people who are really benefiting from your work.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, or maybe you need to add or subtract tasks to your job. I mean, the one thing I found that's amazing about corporate life is that no one will ever yell at you for adding tasks, right? And half the time, they won't yell at you for removing them either because they don't even know you're doing it, right? I can't tell you how many horror stories I have of people who were like, you know what, I stopped writing that report because I thought it was pointless. And after 2 weeks, nobody had emailed me and said, where's the report? And so then I realized it doesn't need to be done, right? So you can engage, and that's known as task crafting, relationship crafting, like adding those interactions that will help you. And sometimes it's just a cognitive reframe, right? Sometimes you just have to find a way to remind yourself on a day-to-day basis that this is the ultimate benefit that our organization provides to the world. This is the organization's fight. And then draw that chain of events where the work that you do enables people to do that, right? I mean, a lot of us in this space are pretty familiar with Adam Grant's probably most popular study is the study of the University of Michigan call center, the students who were basically on a work-study program to smile and dial and go beg alumni for scholarships. That's a pretty demeaning job until Adam and the other researchers started bringing in students to tell them the benefit that they had from the scholarship that came from that call center, right? There's no reason you have to wait for a manager to do that for you. You can find your own ways to go, what is that end benefit that we're a part of? And then draw the series of events that starts with your job and ends with that. And then find a way to keep that top of mind in your day-to-day work.
I love that. So what I'm taking from this is I could be sitting in a call center. Maybe I'm a volunteer, maybe I'm the low person on the totem, but I could still have this bright idea that, hey, I know somebody who benefited from this. Let me invite them in.
Exactly. Or let me ask them to record a 90-second video on their phone and text message it to me, and then I'll show it to the people on my team, right? I mean, we live in this era where there's no limit to how easy it is to find these stories, right? Back when Grant was doing this study, it took some work to find a student and drag them in and whatever. Now, I mean, you could do that. You could do like, here's a great example of job crafting. KPMG did this. They did this top down, but you could do it on your own level. They started this, what do we do at KPMG? Because it's an auditing company, right? They do tax audits. It's a vital thing in terms of making sure the playing field is fair, but it's hard to see that in the day-to-day. So they went back through the company's history and found out that they were involved in the Lend-Lease Act, which was America's first venture into the Second World War, helped turn the tide of the war. They were involved in auditing the vote count in the South African election that elected Nelson Mandela, like all these little stories.
Wow, pretty cool.
They started circulating those around, which is a great top-down initiative, but then they did this thing that's really cool. They circulated around with these designed posters that said, here's how we shape history, and it was a picture of Mandela and that whole story. And then they sent people a template to make their own poster, right? What do you do? How do you shape history through your day-to-day stuff? And encourage people. They got like 20,000 different posters for a 40,000 person organization, right?
Wow.
And the thing that I think is amazing is this was 10 or 15 years ago. Now with all of the tools we have available, you could make your own poster and just hang it in your office. And even if no one ever sees it but you, it's going to have a dramatic effect on how you remind yourself of that fight every single day.
And in a virtual world, you can hang it, right behind your desk.
Yeah, you can change your Zoom background to that poster, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Or put it on your social media platform or form a private Facebook or whatever it is. Yes.
I mean, heck, Facebook even lets you make your own profile stickers now, right? So you can do the way that people do it for certain causes, right? You can do that for yourself, right? It's amazing that the tools that we have. The thing that I think a lot of us fail to do is think about those steps, right? What is the fight that we're in? And then how do I draw a line between what I do every day and how the organization is winning that fight?
Okay, so here's a tip I will add on from a career standpoint, which is if you have this bright idea, you could say to your boss or your manager, say, I was listening to David Burkus's book, Pick a Fight. And in it was this really cool idea about how to get everybody behind the thing that we're trying to do. And what I'd like to do is start a campaign or a challenge online or on our Zooms where everybody does this poster thing.
Right. Yeah. Steal the idea entirely, right? And take it inside of your organization. In fact, the fact that an international organization like KPMG that will probably help you get a buy-in from your manager, right?
That's right. Blame it on David Burkus.
I mean, look, I'm a little bit of a textbook narcissist, but I do think KPMG has a bigger brand than I do. I just put that out there.
Okay.
But yeah, no, you can do it yourself. There's no, just because you don't have the title doesn't mean you can't lead that fight, right? Anybody can do it at any level. And if you're doing it for yourself and it's working, the odds are your peers, your coworkers, your future subordinates are going to benefit from that as well.
Exactly.
Subordinate's a dirty term there. Sorry. Your future followers. I like that one better.
I like that too. And the benefit you get from sharing it with your manager is that they see that you're having new ideas about how to make things better. So
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. She gets to steal it and take it to her boss, and then she looks good too, and now you look even better.
Exactly.
We just laid out like your 8-year plan for getting promoted twice. What are you waiting for?
Exactly. The world rewards action takers, so go do this now. Cool. Anything else that individuals can think about in order to adopt this for themselves? Because I think you've given us some really, really good actionable ideas. I just want to make sure that I haven't stopped the flow of your creative brilliance here. That's why I'm asking you.
Again, I mean, I think the big three, just to sort of reiterate, because we really talked about that third one, but the first was task crafting, the idea of what can you add or subtract from your day-to-day activities that will help you remind yourself of that fight. And then the relationship piece, because we went right into the cognitive reframe, but that relationship piece, is there a way you can rearrange your schedule, your calendar, so that you're interacting with those direct beneficiaries, if it's the ally fight, or you're interacting with things that remind you of the revolution, if it's the revolutionary fight, right? So the task and relationship, don't just jump to what we call cognitive crafting. That task and relationship goes a long way too.
Super. Yeah. You know, people have said to me, May, you live in your head, because I imagine things. I love new ideas. And so of course I would go right to the cognitive. Sorry about that. All right. Well, fantastic. So just thinking about how we can tie all of this together, because this whole idea of picking a fight in terms of choosing your fight, choosing the mission that's going to really energize your team, energize yourself, and remind yourself of why you show up every day and do what you do. I think this is so powerful, David. So are there one or two main takeaways that you want to close with?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest takeaway, we actually said it at the top, is this: do you have a compelling answer to the question, what are we fighting for? And we talked about that at the top. Candidly, what I didn't mention is why I personally feel like that's so important. Which is that, I mean, I think things like work-life balance are a total myth. I mean, heck, we're all living in that right now as our work and life, and everything happens in the same square footage, right? Yeah. But the truth is, I've always thought it was a myth, because we focus on hours or time or things like that. And the truth is, if you're in a job that drains you, if you're in a job that doesn't actually energize you, that doesn't give you a sense of meaning and purpose, and all of that toxicity gets soaked into you on a day-to-day basis, you drag that crap home with you too, right? So it doesn't matter how many hours you're spending at home if your work is draining the life out of you, because you're then going to be a drain on the people around you when it comes to that life contingent. So, I mean, I believe this is so important for that reason. I mean, personally, that's what I'm fighting for, is I think work is too important to most of our lives to, for lack of a better term, to suck for 80% of the people, which is where we are right now, right?
Yeah.
And so it starts with you. It starts with you watching this video of going, you know what? That's exactly right. I need that. And it starts with meaning and purpose and knowing what you're fighting for. People don't want to join a company anymore. They want to join a crusade. And if your company can't tell you what that crusade is, it's time to find your own crusade.
Awesome. David, how can people get their hands on your book, and how can they learn more from you?
Yeah. So, I mean, the book is available anywhere audiobooks are. So we did it in partnership with Audible, which is a lot of fun. But if you listen to audiobooks on anything, even your local library, it's there. You can find it. DavidBurkus.com, Burkus. It's a really weird last name, I know, is where you can find out more about it. There's also a ton of resources from assessments and slide decks to do this with your team, or even a whole sort of free 3-day course to think through how to do some of the application stuff that May and I were talking about earlier. All of that is at davidburkus.com and totally free. I hope you get the $5 book, but it's totally free even if you don't.
Fantastic. David, thank you so much. And I just want to say, I highly recommend David's latest book. And it's so awesome. David, you actually read it yourself, because it sounded like you were reading it to me.
It is me.
Yes.
It's the first time I've gotten to do that, which was a lot of fun and a lot of cough drops.
Well, what I loved about it is it sounded just like you. It was coming straight from the heart. And it's just so, what's the audio version of readable? It's so listen-toable.
It's so listen-toable. I love that. I'm going to steal that.
Be my guest. So I highly recommend it. It is really going to help you keep your team more motivated and get you more motivated and have you enjoying your work and your life. So thank you, David. Thank you for staying involved. And I just want to end by saying, keep learning, keep growing, and keep going.